The wind howled across the jagged cliffs of Cyralis 4, slamming sheets of silvery rain against the reinforced domes of Outpost Ardent. Lieutenant Commander Jalen Thorne stood at the observation deck, watching white-hot lightning fork across the emerald skies. The storms on Cyralis were violent, unpredictable, and beautiful, like most things about this uncharted world. For the past 90 days, his team had catalogued alien flora and strange animal life, but tonight felt off. A low thrumming buzz in the air seemed to vibrate in his bones. "Lieutenant, we've got seismic tremors, Sector 9," said Specialist Ryan Patel through the comms, her voice tight with urgency. "Unstable ground, registering deep subsurface movement." "Natural or synthetic?" Jalen asked, already grabbing his exo-armor from the rack beside him. "Unclear. Patterns not random, definitely structured. Get the rover prepped. I'll meet you at Bay 3. The wind nearly knocked him sideways as he exited the dome, rain clattering off his armor like bullets. The reinforced rover waited, lights piercing the downpour, engine already rumbling with contained energy. Ryan sat at the console, scanning readouts. They rolled across the soaked terrain, tires kicking up sprays of mud and neon moss. 2 clicks out, the ground gave way. A massive sinkhole yawned before them, black and deep, ringed with glowing crystalline roots. "Stop here," Jalen said. They approached on foot, tethered by magnetic lines to the rover. At the pit's edge, they peered down into darkness, where dim light pulsed from a subterranean chamber. Walls of hexagonal black plates shimmered with faint gold veins. "Some kind of buried structure," Ryan muttered. "It's ancient." A faint sound caught Jalen's ear, a whimper. He turned, scanning the edge of the pit, and there, barely visible in the glow, was a small, injured creature. It had bright amber fur and enormous, liquid green eyes that blinked at him with intelligence and fear. A slash down its side oozed glowing fluid. Jalen crouched low. "Hey, easy. You're hurt." The ground shook violently. Cracks split the chamber walls. The pit groaned. "Back to the rover!" Ryan shouted. Jalen hesitated for only a second before sweeping the small creature gently into his arm and stuffing it into the padded pouch on his suit. They sprinted back as the ground behind them collapsed in on itself, the alien chamber vanishing in a swirl of dust and energy. Back at the outpost, the others wanted to study the creature, but Jalen refused. "It's injured. I'll tend to it first." In his quarters, he cleaned the wound with sterilized gel and offered it small bites of ration protein. It ate carefully, eyes never leaving his. "What are you?" Jalen whispered. That night, he dreamed of golden cities and beings with obsidian skin and eyes like twin suns. Great beasts like the one in his care-prowled ancient temples. When he awoke, the creature was curled beside him, warm and purring. Its eyes met his, and something passed between them. Jalen Thorne's life would never be the same. In the weeks that followed, the creature, whom Jalen began calling Solon, after the ancient Cyralicen word for ember, recovered swiftly. What once fit snugly in his arm now stood nearly knee-high, its amber fur growing denser and sleeker, muscles forming beneath its lithe frame. But it wasn't just the physical transformation that alarmed and fascinated Jalen, it was Solon's mind. He understood commands. Not like a trained dog, but like a peer. When Jalen asked him to sit, Solon did it not with obedience but intent. When spoken to, Solon tilted his head, visibly processing, often responding with expressive sounds or tail gestures. "You're not a pet," Jalen murmured during one of their late-night observations beneath the storm-washed skylight. "You're something more." Solon blinked slowly and leaned against him, a low hum resonating from his chest. The science team wasn't blind to the changes. Every week, more questions were asked. Why hadn't Jalen submitted Solon for full testing? Why were there faint power surges coming from his quarters during the night? Ryan, his closest friend on the team, finally confronted him. "You're keeping secrets," she said plainly one morning. "Whatever that thing is, it's affecting the outpost systems." "I'm not hiding anything dangerous," Jalen insisted. "You've bonded with it." The silence between them was answer enough. Later that day, Captain Idren pulled Jalen into the command chamber. The older man's lined face was tight with concern. "Explain this," Idren said, pointing to the hollow monitor. Lines of data rippled across it, energy readings from Jalen's quarters. Patterns within patterns. Not random. Not environmental. Structured. Jalen rubbed his temples. "I can't explain it. But I know this, he's not a threat. Earth Central thinks otherwise," Idren said grimly. "A research vessel is en route to collect the specimen. They want it transferred to the Mimir Deep Lab for full analysis. That's non-negotiable." "No," Jalen said. "Solon isn't just a specimen. He's dreaming. Communicating. He shows me visions." The captain frowned. "You're claiming it's psychic?" "I'm claiming there's a connection. He's been showing me things, memories, I think. An ancient city. Temples. Creatures like him. And beings that are coming." Before Idren could answer, an alarm blared. "Unidentified vessel entering atmosphere," the outpost AI announced. The hollow screen changed. A silver, manta-shaped craft cut through the clouds like a blade through silk. It shimmered with colorless light, its surface flowing like molten glass. "They're hailing us," said Ryan, who had rushed in. "Put it through," Idren barked. The screen flickered to reveal a being both alien and hauntingly regal. Tall and slender, her skin was deep lavender, dusted with starlight flecks. Her hair, silver and straight, floated as if underwater, and eyes like twin galaxies stared outward with ancient weight. "I am Lady Kaylani of the Stellan Synod," she said, her voice both melodic and resonant. "You have something of ours." Captain Idren narrowed his eyes. "This is a peaceful expedition. What exactly do you claim we possess?" "A guardian whelp," she said. "Taken from the Chamber of Embers during a sacred rite." Jalen stepped forward. "He wasn't taken. He was dying in a collapsed structure. I saved him." Lady Kaylani's gaze turned sharply to him. "And yet he bonded to you?" "He chose me," Jalen said quietly. "And I chose him." The alien's expression twitched, a flicker of surprise. "Impossible. Guardians bond only with the blood-marked. Our chosen. Our royal line." At that moment, Solon entered the room, standing tall and alert beside Jalen. He locked eyes with Kaylani and gave a resonant, warbling call that echoed across the chamber. Kaylani took a step back. "By the stars. It's true. What does it mean?" Jalen asked, resting a hand on Solon's back. She hesitated, then spoke softly. "It means, Lieutenant Thorne, that your life is no longer your own." He stared at her. "Then whose is it?" "His," she said. "And ours. You must come with us. There are forces in the void that will sense what you've done. And they will come for you both." Jalen looked down at Solon, whose eyes shimmered like green fire. "Then we go together." The alien ship was unlike anything Jalen had ever seen, organic and mechanical, its walls pulsing faintly with life. As they crossed its threshold, Solon let out a low, uncertain trill, pressing close to Jalen's side. Lady Kaylani walked ahead, her flowing robes trailing stardust with each step. "We will take you to Sarandar," she said over her shoulder. "Homeworld of the Synod, and the cradle of all guardian life." Ryan had tried to stop him before he boarded, grabbing his wrist with a desperate grip. "Jalen, don't go. You don't know them. You don't even know what Solon is." Jalen met her eyes. "I know he's not just a creature. He's something important. I've seen it. Felt it. He's part of something ancient. And now so am I." She released him, her expression torn between fear and understanding. "Then come back. Promise me." "I'll try." As the ship ascended into orbit, Jalen watched the green and silver landscape of Cyralis fall away. Solon climbed into his lap, curling his growing body into a tighter coil than before. His heartbeat thudded gently against Jalen's ribs. The stars stretched to lines, and the ship plunged into void space. Sarander was breathtaking. From orbit, the world looked like a blooming iris. Rings of aquamarine oceans, concentric jungles, and spiraling mountain ranges. Ancient structures pierced the atmosphere like needles of obsidian wrapped in flowering vines. Thousands of guardian silhouettes patrolled the skies, some gliding on wings, others leaping between towering buildings. The moment the ship landed, they were greeted by a delegation. At the front stood a tall male alien with golden skin and intricate tattoos that glowed faintly with his pulse. He wore armor made from radiant crystal and a sash bearing the mark of the Synod. "This is Lord Vayer," Kaylani introduced. "My kin. He presides over the rights of ascendancy." Vayer studied Jalen coldly. "You are the outsider. I'm Jalen Thorne, Salen's bondmate. You are an anomaly. One we will understand before we decide what to do with you." Jalen bristled, but before he could speak, Salen let out a warning growl. The gathered aliens took a collective step back. Kaylani raised her hand. "Enough. You'll find the Guardian does not appreciate threats to his bondmate." Vayer's jaw tightened. "We'll see how far that loyalty runs. Bring them to the Hall of Concordance." The hall was shaped like a massive dome of shimmering crystal, each wall etched with generations of history, glyphs and images of Stellan royals standing beside massive blue and gold guardians. Jalen stood at the center of the chamber while Salen remained just behind him, tail flicking in growing irritation. A council of Synod elders sat on thrones shaped like blooming flowers, each one older and more ornately dressed than the last. "We have long known the Guardians bond only with those of the Stellan line," one elder said, her voice brittle and dry. "You defy tradition." "I didn't mean to," Jalen replied. "He came to me. I didn't force anything." "Yet the bond is undeniable," murmured another, stroking the curling spines on his chin. "Your energy signatures have intertwined. Even now, the Guardian grows because of you." Salen padded forward and sat beside Jalen. The elders all murmured at once. "Have you seen the visions?" Kaylani asked suddenly. Jalen nodded. "The cities. The temples. The things in the dark. That got their attention." "The Umbrivores," whispered an elder, her green eyes flickering. "The old enemy." "You've seen them?" asked Vayer, stepping forward. "How?" "Salen showed me," Jalen said. "In dreams. Warnings, maybe? Or memories." Vayer turned to Kaylani, face tight. "We must begin the trials." Kaylani's expression hardened. "He's not one of us. He hasn't trained." "No," Jalen said. "But I'm willing." Kaylani studied him for a long moment, the weight of an ancient civilization behind her gaze. Then she nodded once. "Very well. The Guardian trial begins at moonrise." She looked down at Salen, then up at Jalen again. "But know this, human. If your bond fails, if your connection falters, it will not be you who suffers. It will be him." The sun on Sarander dipped below the horizon, casting golden rays across towering crystal trees. As twilight deepened, the moons emerged, one silver, the other copper-red, casting an eerie glow over the ceremonial grounds outside the city walls. Jalen stood in the center of a vast stone circle, surrounded by ancient monoliths. Each pillar hummed faintly, alive with old power. The air was thick with anticipation. Dozens of stellants lined the perimeter, including the Synod elders and Lord Vayer. At Kaylani's side, Salen stood tall, now nearly at Jalen's hip, his amber fur lit from within by a soft inner glow. Kaylani approached him quietly. "The trial of harmony isn't a test of skill. It's a test of unity. You must move as one. Think as one. Feel as one." Jalen nodded, jaw tight. "And if we fail? The Guardian will lose coherence," she said softly. "The bond fractures. He'll revert to a feral state. There's no recovery from that." She stepped back and raised her hand. The trial began. A deep vibration rippled through the stone circle. The pillars flared to life, emitting pulses of golden light. A dome of invisible force sealed the circle, muting all outside sound. Only Jalen and Solon remained inside. A shimmering construct appeared from the center of the ground, an illusion, yet tangible enough to strike. It took the form of a massive black beast, twisted and shifting, with dozens of glowing eyes and gaping jaws. The embodiment of chaos. Jalen's first instinct was to run. Instead, he closed his eyes, reaching out through their bond. Solon. I'm here. The connection surged. Emotion, sensation, thought, all passed between them in rapid succession. Solon understood. Jalen took a slow breath and stepped forward. The beast lunged. Solon moved in sync with him, leaping high to intercept the attack. Jalen ducked low, rolled, and reached for the crystal blade planted nearby. He gripped it just as Solon's shoulder slammed into the beast's head, sending it staggering. The monoliths pulsed brighter, sensing their rhythm. Another illusion formed, this time a wall of flame. Jalen flinched, but Solon brushed against him, calming his fear with a low purr. We face it together. They walked forward through the fire. The heat licked their skin, but it did not burn. It was an illusion, meant to provoke panic. Their shared trust shattered the deception. The final challenge came silently. The beast reformed behind them, larger, angrier. It roared with soundless fury. Jalen gritted his teeth, raising his blade. Solon crouched beside him, eyes glowing fiercely. But instead of fighting, Jalen did something else. He dropped the blade. No more fear, he said aloud. No more violence. We face you with harmony. The pillars exploded with light. The beast froze, its body dissolving into particles that scattered across the trial dome. The illusion was gone. Silence reigned. Then the barrier dropped, and the crowd exhaled as one. Kaylani stepped forward slowly, her expression unreadable. He passed, said an elder. No, said another. They passed. Solon let out a soft cry and pressed against Jalen's side. The bond between them now radiated a glow visible to all, a braided pattern of energy stretching briefly into the air before fading again. Vayer frowned, arms crossed, but Kaylani approached and bowed her head slightly. You've proven the impossible is not only possible, it's powerful. Jalen looked down at Solon, then back up at her. This is only the beginning. The days following the trial of Harmony were a whirlwind. News of Jalen's success spread across Sarandar like wildfire. For the first time in recorded history, a non-Stellan had completed the bond trial with a Guardian, and more than that, he had strengthened it through nonviolence and trust. Many celebrated. Others grew fearful. Inside the archives beneath the Synod Citadel, Kaylani led Jalen through a labyrinth of crystal corridors lit by bioluminescent veins in the stone. Solon padded beside them, calm yet alert. They stopped at an obsidian door covered in ancient glyphs that shimmered in response to Kaylani's presence. This chamber holds records sealed for thousands of cycles, she said, pressing her palm against the door. Only the Synod's heir may enter. Jalen arched an eyebrow. And you're just taking me in without question? She gave him a look. You passed the trial. Solon's bond to you is beyond dispute. That gives you privileges and responsibilities. The door creaked open with a resonant hum. Inside, the chamber was cool and quiet, walls lined with crystalline tablets and floating memory cores. At the center, a raised dais projected a rotating hologram, an ancient map of the galaxy, overlaid with strange dark splotches. These are void signatures, Kaylani explained. Not sensor ghosts. Real entities. We've found ruins across 3 systems matching the patterns. Jalen stepped forward, examining the map. I saw them in my visions. Solon showed me. They're alive. They feed on energy, Kaylani said. Especially emotional resonance. Fear, rage, grief. That's why the bond was created between Guardians and the Synod. A stabilizing link. But they were always meant to bond freely. Jalen murmured, remembering what Solon had shown him in his dreams. Guardians choosing their companions, not being assigned or forced. Your people twisted the truth. Kaylani sighed. my ancestors made compromises. Our survival demanded control. That control became tradition. And tradition became law. She turned toward him then, closer now. But something about you has reset the path. The Guardians are responding. They've begun, choosing again. Jalen felt Solon brush his leg, his tail curling gently around his ankle. Kaylani hesitated. There's more. The ancient texts speak of a convergence, a moment when the void wakes, and a new bond would light the way. An outsider unbound by our customs. One who could unify our kind, or destroy us all. So I'm part of a prophecy, Jalen said dryly. Fantastic. You mock it, she said, stepping closer. But I've seen how Solon looks at you. The trust. The loyalty. He would die for you. Jalen's voice lowered. I'd do the same for him. Their eyes met, and something flickered between them, raw, unresolved, but undeniable. For a moment, the chamber fell still. Kaylani stepped back, breaking the spell. Lord Vayer has called for a formal review. He wants to challenge your right to remain on Sarandar. Let me guess, Jalen said. He thinks I'm dangerous. He's not entirely wrong, she said softly. But I'll stand with you at the review. If you're removed now, we lose everything we've begun. Solon let out a low growl. Jalen looked toward the ceiling, where the map still displayed the spreading void marks. We don't have time for politics. Kaylani nodded. Then we must make time. And show them the truth. The Hall of Accord burned with quiet tension. The Archchamber, normally reserved for peaceful debate, now thrummed with barely contained conflict. Dozens of high-ranking Stellans filled the viewing tiers above, murmuring among themselves. Kaylani stood beside Jalen at the center, flanked by neutral arbiters. Solon sat poised at his side, larger now, reaching Jalen's waist when standing, his muscles thicker, his glowing amber fur rippling with restrained energy. At the far end of the hall stood Lord Vayer. Clad in radiant ceremonial armor, he exuded polished arrogance. Behind him were his loyalists, stoic, armored, watchful. Many of them bore deep, older Guardian bond marks on their forearms, status symbols under the old tradition. This is an affront, Vayer began, his voice booming through the hall. A non-Stellan has not only bonded with a Guardian but has passed our sacred trial and now walks freely in our capital. This human has violated every law we hold sacred. He saved Solon, Kaylani countered, her tone sharp. He didn't seek the bond. It formed naturally. And the Guardians recognize it. They recognize instability. Vayer snapped. The Guardian grows too fast. His energy surges threaten the temple grids. You know what happens when a bond matures without the ascendant right. That's why we must perform it, Kaylani said. Properly. Through consent, not control. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Vayer turned his cold gaze on Jalen. You would have us believe you understand our customs. That you care for a creature you barely comprehend. Jalen stepped forward. I don't claim to know everything. But I know what Solon means to me. He's not a weapon. He's not a tool. He's a person. Laughter broke from Vayer's supporters. A person? Vayer sneered. He's a beast. A sentient weapon bred to defend us from the void. And now, that purpose is compromised. The bond must be severed. Solon growled low and deep. The ground trembled faintly. You want to talk about danger? Jalen asked, his voice rising. There's something coming. The void I saw in my visions, it's real. And if we're fighting each other over bloodlines, we'll be blind when it arrives. Kaylani stepped forward beside him. The ancient rites were meant to protect our people. Not cage the Guardians. Jalen and Solon have awakened something long dormant. And I believe it's the key to our survival. Vayer gestured. If he is truly worthy, let him prove it. Face a bonded champion in the ring of echoes. Gasps echoed around the chamber. Kaylani stiffened. That tradition was abolished generations ago. It was forgotten, Thayer said with a cruel smile. Until now. The arbiters looked between them, silent. Then the oldest among them stood. So be it. The Ring of Echoes will decide. Kaylani turned to Jalen as the chamber emptied around them. You can't do this, she said. The ring is brutal. A trial by combat, your guardian versus his. Jalen looked down at Solon, who was staring back at him with calm resolve. He won't fight unless I do, Jalen said. And I won't let anyone take him from me. Kaylani's voice softened. Then I'll help you train. The ring will test your bond in ways you've never faced. Jalen nodded. Then we'd better start now. The training grounds carved into the cliffs beyond the capital had once been used for military drills. Now they stood as a relic of older times. There, beneath a canopy of shifting suns and swirling crystal clouds, Jalen and Solon began preparing for the trial that could decide both their futures. Kaylani met them at dawn, dressed not in ceremonial finery but in a flexible combat tunic that hugged her form with a warrior's practicality. Her expression was resolute, eyes set with purpose. The Ring of Echoes isn't about brute strength alone, she said as Solon prowled the sand. It's a battle of synchronization. Of instinct. Of knowing your guardian's rhythm as if it were your own heartbeat. Jalen wiped sweat from his brow. Good. Because if it's just about strength, I've already lost. Kaylani didn't smile. Thayer's bonded guardian is named Threx. He's fully matured, massive, disciplined, and brutal. He doesn't hesitate. Then we don't hesitate either, Jalen said, casting a look toward Solon, who turned at once to meet his gaze, responding to the unspoken thought. Kaylani motioned toward a curved arena etched into the cliffside. Then let's begin. She activated a series of projection pylons. Illusory threats flickered to life, spectral creatures, simulated fire bursts, and phasing constructs meant to confuse and isolate. Stay close to Solon, she ordered. Move together. Always together. Jalen drew a practice staff as the first illusion lunged, a six-legged beast with glowing claws. Solon leapt first, knocking it off course, while Jalen pivoted and delivered a precise strike to its neck. They turned at once to face the next. Strike. Dodge. Advance. Every hour built a new layer of coordination. Kaylani observed carefully, issuing corrections when Jalen lagged or Solon broke from pattern. She never raised her voice, but her commands cut clean. Too slow, Jalen! He was already in motion, and you hesitated. I'm trying, he grunted. Try faster. He adjusted. Solon learned faster. By the second day, they moved as if linked by invisible thread. Fluid, deliberate, precise. Not just two beings reacting, but one force anticipating. During the rests, Kaylani sat with them beneath the vine-covered canopy, offering him nutrient packs and cool water. You're improving faster than I expected, she admitted one night, watching the stars flicker between leaves. Solon's rapid growth is accelerating your own connection. Jalen sat back against a stone, Solon curled beside him like a massive feline sentinel. Sometimes I feel like I'm living inside someone else's life, he said quietly. All I ever wanted was to explore the stars. And now I'm part of a prophecy. Kaylani turned toward him, her silver hair catching the starlight. Do you regret it? No, he said without hesitation. I just wish I knew what came next. She looked away, but not before he saw the flicker of emotion in her eyes. Neither of us knows, she said. But we face it together. Their hands brushed briefly, and something warm stirred between them. Still unspoken, still fragile. Solon let out a soft rumble of contentment, curling tighter. We fight tomorrow, Kaylani said at last. The Ring of Echoes awaits. And if we win? Jalen asked. You become more than just Solon's bondmate, she said. You become a symbol. One the old order cannot ignore. And if we lose? Kaylani's voice dropped. Then Solon will be taken. You will be sent home. and the synod returns to its silence. Jalen looked down at his companion, his friend, whose slow, steady breathing echoed his own. Then we don't lose. The Ring of Echoes was no simple arena, it was a sacred place. Carved into a mountain hollow, its smooth stone floor was lined with ancient glyphs that shimmered faintly beneath the feet of combatants. 4 towering spires surrounded it, each one humming with an old energy that seemed to pulse with the heartbeat of the guardians themselves. The crowd gathered in silence, the weight of history pressing down on them. Jalen stood at one end of the ring, his chest tight but his spine straight. Solon paced beside him, muscles rippling beneath his radiant amber fur. He had grown again, his shoulder now level with Jalen's ribcage, and his tail swishing like a whip behind him. Across the field, Lord Vaer stood calmly, his expression unreadable. Beside him loomed Threx. Threx was a beast. Twice Solon's size, his fur was black with streaks of silver, and his eyes glowed with a pale, unnatural hue. Each movement was slow and precise, controlled violence waiting to ignite. The crowd stirred uneasily at the sight of him. From a high platform, the arbiter raised his hand. "This is not a fight of dominance," he announced. "It is a demonstration of harmony. The bondmates who remain united through all trials shall be declared the rightful holders of the guardian right." The crowd fell still. A chime rang out, and the trial began. Threx moved first, fast for his size, charging with an earth-shaking roar. Jalen and Solon split instinctively. Solon ducked under the charging beast, swiping at his exposed flank while Jalen rolled to the side and came up with his shock staff ready. Threx barely reacted to the hit. "He doesn't feel pain," Jalen realized aloud, backing up fast. Kaylani's voice echoed from the edge. "Threx was bonded through control, not choice. His instincts are buried under Vaer's will." Vaer gave a subtle signal, and Threx twisted with impossible speed. He pounced at Solon, slamming into him with crushing force. Solon was thrown across the arena, skidding hard into the boundary wall. "Solon!" Jalen yelled, running toward him. But before he reached his companion, Threx was on him. A claw struck his chest, flinging him backward. His breath vanished as he slammed into the stone. Pain exploded through his ribs. "Get up." Solon's voice, not words, but emotion, fear, determination, filled Jalen's mind through their bond. "Get up. We are not finished." Jalen groaned and forced himself upright. Blood ran down his side. Across the arena, Solon stood again, bruised but defiant, eyes locked on Threx. "I'm with you," Jalen whispered. They moved together. Solon feinted left, then spun right. Jalen mirrored his movement, slamming his staff into Threx's knee while Solon bit into the beast's shoulder. Threx shrieked, finally reacting, but not in rage. In confusion. Vaer's commands faltered. The crowd sensed it. The Guardian was breaking free. Solon pounced again, not to attack, but to connect. His paw rested on Threx's head, a pulse of golden light spreading from his claws. Jalen felt it, saw it through their bond. A message. An invitation. "You don't have to be controlled." Threx staggered, his glowing eyes flickering. Then the arena exploded with energy. The glyphs on the ground flared, reacting to the surge of emotion between the guardians. A beam of white-gold light erupted between Solon and Jalen, visible to all, a resonance bond at its peak. Threx backed away from Vaer. Slowly, deliberately, he stepped toward Solon, lowering his head. The crowd gasped. The arbiter rose. "The outcome is clear." Vaer stepped forward, furious. "This is a trick." "It is truth," the arbiter said, his voice booming. "The Guardian chose. The bond holds. The right is fulfilled." The crowd erupted. Some cheered, others wept. For the first time in generations, a Guardian had defied command, and chosen freedom. Jalen turned as Kaylani approached him. Her gaze met his. "You did it," she said quietly. "No," he replied, reaching down to touch Solon's warm fur. "We did it." The aftermath of the battle in the Ring of Echoes was unlike anything Jalen had experienced. For the first time since arriving on Sarander, the people looked at him not with suspicion, but awe. Whispers followed him through the palace halls. Not just the outsider, now the bond forged, the first non-Stellan ever to form a pure guardian link without control or bloodline. Kaylani escorted him and Solon through the highest reaches of the citadel, into the Temple of Light, a place most Stellans were forbidden to enter. The ancient domed structure pulsed with soft energy, its walls covered in swirling, living scripture that seemed to move with thought itself. "We haven't been here since I was a child," Kaylani whispered. "Only those involved in the rite of renewal may enter, and only when a new bond is forged by destiny." Solon padded silently beside them, his presence calm, powerful. His fur glowed faintly as he stepped onto the temple floor. At the center of the chamber stood a massive pedestal. On it rested a crystal sphere suspended between curved branches of gold. As Jalen approached, the sphere lit up. "Place your hand upon it," Kaylani said, her voice reverent, "and be shown the origin of the bond." Jalen hesitated. "You trust this thing?" "I trust the Guardians," she said simply. He looked at Solon, then reached out and laid his hand upon the sphere. Light burst outward, not blinding but infinite. Jalen's mind was wrenched elsewhere. He stood in a memory that was not his. Massive crystalline ships drifted across the stars, manned by towering beings who communicated through resonance, not speech. At their sides stood guardians, larger than Solon, yet unmistakably of the same kind. These entities fought against the creeping darkness that consumed worlds. The Umbrivores, vast creatures of void and hunger. But then came pride. The ancient bond masters grew fearful of their power waning. They rewrote the texts, created false bloodlines, restricted bonding to their own descendants. The Guardians, confused and loyal, obeyed, until the resonance began to weaken. Some bonds shattered. Some Guardians went feral. Entire cities fell. One final vision burned into Jalen's mind, a guardian cub, alone in a collapsing temple, crying out for someone, anyone, to find him. He gasped and fell to one knee. Solon was beside him instantly. Kaylani reached out, steadying him. "You saw it." "The truth," Jalen said, breathless. "The lies your people were fed. The entire system is built on something broken." Kaylani nodded solemnly. "And now it falls to us to fix it." Above them, the sphere dimmed, but not before a final image flickered in its heart, a swarm of shadowed shapes approaching the outer rim of the galaxy. "The Umbrivores," Jalen whispered. Kaylani's voice hardened. "Then we must act quickly. If they reach us before we're united, there won't be anything left to save." Solon let out a growl, low, guttural, protective. Jalen placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then let's get ahead of them." Kaylani turned, her silver hair catching the soft temple light. "There's one more step. You've earned the bond. Now you must become its champion. A true Guardian Lord." "And what does that mean?" "It means war is coming," she said softly. "And you may have to lead both our worlds into it." A week passed in a blur of preparation. The Synod, reluctantly at first, began to shift. The Council could no longer deny what had unfolded in the Ring of Echoes or the visions Jalen had received within the Temple of Light. The ancient lies had fractured. The truth, as seen through an outsider's bond, spread rapidly across the planet and into its colonies. For the first time in living memory, non-royals were allowed to approach unbonded guardians. And the guardians began to choose. Some formed bonds within moments, drawn not to bloodlines but to harmony. Others remained unlinked, waiting. Hoping. Jalen stood at the newly established Guardian Concordance Academy, watching dozens of prospective bondmates undergo attunement trials. Solon sat like a regal statue at his side, his amber fur flowing with each breath, his green eyes watchful. Kaylani joined him on the terrace, a datapad tucked beneath her arm. 53 new successful bondings across 3 provinces, she said. 5 of them from mining colonies. Jalen smiled faintly. That would have been unthinkable a month ago. I know, she said. And yet here we are. They watched a child, a small, trembling Stellan girl, kneel before a towering blue guardian, only for the creature to lower its head and purr gently as it pressed its snout to her forehead. Light bloomed between them, soft and pure. Kaylani's voice turned somber. But not all are happy. Vayer? Jalen asked. He's vanished. Took some of his loyalists and fled into the outer systems. We think he's looking for something. Looking for what? Kaylani turned toward him, her eyes sharp. Control. If he can't lead through tradition, he'll lead through fear. Jalen looked out at the sprawling valley, where Guardian training fields now glowed under the morning sun. We don't have time for a civil war. No, she agreed. Especially now. She handed him the data pad. He glanced at the contents, and went still. Deep space sensor logs. Outer rim activity. Fluctuations in gravitational readings. Visual distortion patterns. All matching the signature of the entity Jalen had seen in his vision. The Umbravores. How far? He asked quietly. 2 systems out, she said. No contact yet. But they're watching. Solon growled softly. They're waiting for us to remain divided. Kaylani continued. But if we bond, truly bond, across species, class, culture, we might have a chance. Jalen lowered the datapad. Then we bring our worlds together. Not through politics. Through unity. She stepped closer. That starts with you. He turned, facing her fully. And you. Kaylani didn't look away. You are not what I expected when I first heard an outsider had bonded with a cub. Jalen smiled faintly. You weren't what I expected either. Their hands touched, tentative then firm. Kaylani tilted her head slightly. There's a tradition among Stellan royalty. When bondmates choose one another outside the Guardian trials, it is formalized through a shared rite. Not just physical, but symbolic. A mutual vow. And you're saying we. I'm saying the bond between you and Solon changed the world. But the bond between us might change the future. Solon snorted, what could only be interpreted as approval, and patted between them, placing one paw on each of their feet. Jalen laughed softly. Guess he's ready. Kaylani smiled. Then let's give the galaxy something worth uniting for. High above the capital, warning lights flared again, another reading, another shadow. The storm was coming. But so was their answer. The ceremonial chamber at the summit of the sky spire was like nothing Jalen had ever seen, an open-air sanctum suspended between 3 crescent-shaped towers, high above the clouds. The floor shimmered with translucent crystal, revealing the city below in gleaming fractal patterns. Above, the twin moons of Sarander hung in perfect alignment, bathing the structure in silver and violet light. This was where the ancient vows were made, not just between guardian and bondmate, but between leaders, equals, souls seeking union not through dominance or law, but through resonance. Jalen stood at the center of the platform, dressed not in armor or uniform, but ceremonial robes of dark blue and gold, the new colors of the Concordance Pact. Solon sat at his side, his massive form calm and still, though his glowing fur pulsed slightly in time with Jalen's heartbeat. Kaylani emerged from the archway opposite him, flanked by 2 honor keepers. Her gown flowed like liquid starlight, woven with silver threads that danced as she moved. The glowing sigils of her lineage had been replaced by a single emblem on her chest, the symbol of the new unity, a circle containing both human and Stellan glyphs interlinked with the Guardian's paw. When she reached him, the honor keepers stepped back. This moment, she said softly, was never meant to be in the histories. And yet, here we are. I never thought I'd be here, Jalen murmured. I thought I'd die on a forgotten outpost with a job I didn't care about. Now I'm vowing to share a future with the woman who's rewriting an entire civilization. Kaylani stepped closer, her hand finding his. You didn't just rewrite it, Jalen. You reminded us of what was lost. A gentle chime rang F. The vow had begun. Kaylani and Jalen turned toward one another, palms pressed, the stone beneath them glowing as the energy of their bond, symbolic and spiritual, wove into light between them. I vow, Kaylani said, her voice steady, to walk beside you not as ruler or heir, but as your equal. Your partner. Your heart. I vow, Jalen echoed, to honor what we build together, no matter where the path leads. No matter what we face. You are my purpose now. The light flared between their joined hands, rising like flame. Solon raised his head and let out a powerful, echoing cry that rippled through the sky, heard for miles across Sarander. The vow was complete. In the silence that followed, Kaylani leaned in and kissed him, slow, sure, and filled with the weight of every moment they had survived to reach this one. Around them, the stars blinked as if in approval, and Solon circled once, placing his body protectively around them both. Later, as the sun began to rise and the city awoke below, Jalen and Kaylani stood at the edge of the sanctum, their shoulders touching. Now what? He asked quietly. Kaylani handed him a new data pad. Scout ships report more void anomalies near the Thorn Reach system. We're assembling a strike fleet. Not to start a war, but to make first contact before the enemy does. Jalen looked at her, then at Solon, who was already watching the sky. Then let's make history, he said. Together they descended the sky spire, guardian, bondmate, and heir, with the stars stretching ahead of them, and a galaxy waiting to be united. The command deck of the Vowkeeper, the first hybrid flagship co-developed by humans and Stellants, thrummed with focused energy. Polished alloy walls merged seamlessly with living crystal structures that adjusted to crew presence, lighting, and even emotional resonance. Screens displayed synchronized Guardian telemetry, fleet diagnostics, and deep space scans. At its heart stood Jalen, now outfitted in functional combat robes laced with the same sigil he had worn during the vow ceremony, now a symbol across both worlds. Kaylani stood beside him, cloaked in a commander's mantle, her silver hair pulled into a braid that bore woven metallic cords of her ancestral line and the Concordance Order. Their relationship was no longer whispered rumor. It had become a statement. A bond that represented the bridge between species, worlds, and centuries of division. Before them, on the forward observation pane, hung the Thorn Reach system, once deemed barren, now pulsing with unknown energy signatures. We've detected the anomaly, said Lieutenant Arvin, a human Stellan half-blood serving as liaison officer. Sector Delta 9. Shifting patterns, gravitational fluxes, identical to the umbrivore behavior seen in Jalen's vision. Jalen nodded. Any signs of planetary devastation? Not yet, Arvin replied. But the temperature on the fifth planet has dropped 20 degrees in 12 hours. The surface is losing light, like it's being siphoned. Kaylani leaned in. Dispatch the forward scout wing. I want Guardian riders on the ground within the hour. The deck responded with coordinated movement. 5 Guardian riders stepped onto launch pads with their bonded creatures, 2 of which had only recently been formed by the Concordance Academy. Their guardians shimmered in varied hues, blue, silver, and even one deep red, standing like statues of living power. Jalen turned to Solon, now towering at nearly 4 meters, with a heavy crest of fur around his neck and shoulders that glowed faintly with layered resonance. Are you ready? Solon didn't respond in words, but Jalen felt the pulse in his mind, calm, prepared, protective. They launched within the hour. The Vowkeeper's lower deck opened like a blooming flower, releasing 6 Guardian riders, Jalen and Solon among them. The entry descent was rough, turbulence from a disrupted atmosphere. Winds moved as if pushed by some invisible mass. Below them, the surface of the planet known as Garros 5 looked hollow. Drained. Colorless forests. Mountains that shimmered with a greasy sheen. Shadows that didn't match the angle of the light. They landed in a shallow basin at the base of a canyon. As soon as Solon's paws hit the ground, he let out a growl. The other guardians responded, their eyes glowing brighter. Something was here. You feel it too, Jalen thought. Yes, came Solon's answer. From the far end of the basin, the air began to ripple. The shadows moved where there were no objects. From the distortion emerged a creature, a writhing mass of tendrils and liquid dark, roughly the size of a small shuttle. It floated above the ground, drawing light inward like a black hole. The lead rider, a Stellan named Varys, stepped forward with his silver-furred guardian. "This is where we make first contact," he said, voice taut. The creature didn't charge. It hovered. Then it projected. Jalen flinched as raw emotions slammed into his mind: fear, hunger, cold. Not language, but urges. Ancient need. A desire to devour harmony. The Umbrivores fed on bonds. On the very thing the Guardians lived for. Solon growled and lowered his head. Jalen felt his pulse racing. "We can't let them get closer to concordant space," Jalen whispered. Kaylani's voice came through comms, calm and sharp. "Then show them what unity looks like." Jalen nodded and closed his eyes. "Solon, with me." "Sync." Their resonance surged, light flaring between them. The other riders followed, their guardians forming a circle, glowing brighter. The Umbrivore pulsed, disturbed, uncertain. For the first time, it hesitated. Solon stepped forward, head high. "Go home," Jalen thought, projecting not fear, but defiance. Then Solon let loose a roar that shook the basin, light erupting from his body in a wave that slammed into the creature. The Umbrivore shrieked, not with sound, but with a vibration that cracked stone, and vanished into the void with a flash of curling shadow. Silence returned. "Status?" Kaylani asked. Jalen breathed out slowly. "It retreated. But not far. It was testing us. Then it knows we're not prey," Kaylani said. He looked at Solon, who lowered his head and gently brushed his snout against Jalen's arm. "No," Jalen murmured. "It knows we bite back." Back aboard the Valkeeper, the mood was a mixture of tension and clarity. The Umbrivore had not attacked outright, but its message had been clear. It had tasted the edge of the Guardian's unity, and now it would prepare for more. In the war chamber, a spherical room lined with layered tactical projections, Kaylani, Jalen, and a group of Concordance commanders reviewed the encounter. "It didn't come alone," said Commander Rovas, an older Stellan with a Guardian scar tracing across his temple. "It was a scout. That means a swarm isn't far behind. We've detected residual tear signatures in 3 nearby systems," reported Arvin. "They're using void tunnels to navigate. Faster than light. Untraceable by standard engines." Jalen folded his arms, eyes narrowed. "They're moving like predators. Circling. Mapping us." Kaylani nodded. "And we've shown our hand." A heavy silence followed. Then she straightened. "It was worth it. If we'd held back, they would have sensed weakness. Now they know, our Guardians aren't just relics of a fallen order. They're bonded, growing, and ready." Jalen's comms unit blinked. He tapped it. "This is Thorn." A young officer's voice crackled through. "Sir, we've received a signal from the edge of the Syrian expanse. It's strange." "How strange?" "It's using Guardian resonance patterns. But not one from our registry." Jalen and Kaylani locked eyes. "I'll handle it," he said, already turning to leave. They took a scout ship and reached the signal source within hours. Solon, ever watchful, curled in the rear of the small cabin, head raised, muscles tense. The signal came from a derelict vessel, a human design, but heavily modified. It floated near a dark asteroid belt, its hull pitted, hull torn by some unknown force. There were no life signs. Only the pulse. As they approached, Jalen stepped out in an exosuit, Kaylani beside him, flanked by 2 Guardian guards. The pulse grew stronger, not just audible, but emotional. Solon growled deep in his throat. "I know this pattern," Jalen said, stunned. "It's familiar." They found the source in what remained of the bridge, a containment pod. Inside, curled in stasis, was a Guardian cub. But this one was twisted. Its fur was white with streaks of black energy coursing through it. Its eyes were closed, but Jalen felt the same thrum of emotion pulsing from it. Anguish, fear, and beneath it all, bonded memory. Someone was with it, Kaylani whispered. But they're gone. Jalen touched the pod. A flash overtook his mind. A man, another human, reaching toward the cub, light flickering between them. A moment of resonance. But then a tear. A void breach. The bond sundered. The man devoured. The cub left behind. Solon approached slowly and sat beside the pod. A low, mournful rumble vibrated from his chest. They're targeting young guardians, Jalen realized. Corrupting them. Or worse, turning them. Kaylani's expression was cold now. We can't let that happen again. They brought the pod aboard and stabilized the cub's vitals. The creature trembled in sleep, occasionally twitching as if caught in nightmare. I think it was bonded to someone like me, Jalen said later, watching the pod from the med bay. And now it's half touched by the void, Kaylani replied. He looked at her. We're not just fighting to protect our people anymore. We're fighting to protect the Guardians themselves. Solon turned, eyes glowing, and stepped toward the pod, lowering his head. The cub stirred. A spark passed between them. It would survive. But war had truly begun. The return to Concordance space was swift, and the Vowkeeper's arrival sparked immediate movement among the leadership of both Earth and Sarander. Jalen's report of the corrupted cub and the destroyed vessel had already circulated among diplomatic channels. Now all eyes turned toward a single, inescapable truth. The Guardians were being hunted. Inside the Unity Conclave, a vast council chamber carved into a moon orbiting Sarander's second planet, delegates from Earth's coalition, the Stellan Synod, and the newly formed Concordance Pact gathered for an emergency summit. Holograms shimmered around the chamber. Some showed images of the podlocked cub, its white fur still pulsing with void corruption. Others displayed spectral recordings of the Umbrivore's appearance on Garros 5. Jalen stood before them all, his words measured, deliberate. We've confirmed it. The Umbrivores aren't just targeting planets. They're hunting Guardian bloodlines. Starting with the youngest, the unbonded, the vulnerable. He gestured to the still image of the twisted cub. This one was bonded, briefly, to a human. Not a Stellan. That means the bond is no longer limited by origin. The Void knows that too. A murmur rippled through the delegates. Kaylani stepped forward, her voice resonant and unwavering. We have a choice to make. We can cling to the structures of the past, divided by race, bloodline, and history. Or we unify, form a new coalition, one not built on tradition but purpose. A human admiral, graying, hard-eyed, rose to his feet. And what would you have us do, Princess? Let every soldier bond with alien beasts we still barely understand. No, Kaylani replied. Let those who are chosen step forward. Let those with resonance rise. Guardian bonds aren't tools, they're partnerships. And they will decide who is worthy. Not us. Another voice, a young diplomat from Earth's colonies, leaned forward. I've seen the trials. I've seen what they can do. If the Umbrivores are coming, we don't have a better answer. Jalen spoke again. This isn't just about defense. It's about survival. The more Guardians we bond, the more synchronized our worlds become. Emotionally. Strategically. Spiritually. That bond is our shield. And our weapon. The chamber fell silent. Then the elder from the Synod, the same one who had doubted Jalen during the Ring of Echoes, stood slowly. Then it begins anew, he said, voice hoarse. Let the concordance rite be opened, to all. One by one, the other delegates rose. Agreement passed. The war would not be fought by nations or factions, but by bondmates. Human. Stellan. Guardian. 2 weeks later, training camps spread across Concordance space. Jalen and Kaylani watched as hundreds of candidates from both worlds arrived, scientists, soldiers, healers, wanderers, all drawn by the hope of resonance. Some would bond. Most would not. But for the first time in memory, all were welcome. At the heart of it all stood the still recovering cub, now named Saran. Her white fur had lost some of its void streaks, thanks to weeks of exposure to Salen's stabilizing aura. She had not spoken, not truly, but she had begun to dream. Jalen could feel it when she brushed against Salen's flank or nudged his hand for comfort. "She'll bond again," Kaylani said, watching Saran curl into sleep beside Salen. "But this time, it will be by choice." Jalen nodded. "And when she does, she'll remember who protected her." He looked toward the stars. "And she'll fight for it." The Guardian Concordance Academy had changed. No longer a place limited to noble offspring or elite candidates, it now resembled a growing heartbeat at the center of a unified civilization. Nestled between the mountains of Sarander's second moon, the Academy's new spires rose beside natural cliffs, crystalline structures humming faintly with the energy of hundreds of newly formed bonds. Salen and Jalen moved through the training grounds, watching initiates undergo their trials. Some struggled, rejected gently by the Guardians. Others, upon contact, glowed instantly with the golden light of resonance. Kaylani, always composed, now bore the role of Chancellor over the Academy, though she still trained alongside her riders daily. On one particular morning, as twin dawns broke across the sky, Saran stirred from her long rest. Jalen sat beside her pod, having made it a habit to spend at least an hour every day near the young Guardian, feeding her warmth through the bond he shared with Salen. Her breathing had grown steady over the past days, and today, her eyes opened, pale silver now, no longer streaked with shadow. She blinked slowly, her gaze locking with his. Salen approached and nuzzled her gently, a soft purr emanating from deep within his chest. "She remembers you," Kaylani said quietly, having joined him. "Does she remember him?" Jalen asked, referring to the human who had once bonded with her. "Perhaps pieces," Kaylani answered. "But the void corrupted what it touched. All she knows now is safety. Salen. And you." As the pod's shell dissolved around her, Saran stepped out shakily. She was still small, no larger than a human child, but the way she looked around, sensing the air, the stone, the sky, spoke of intelligence far beyond her years. When she reached Jalen, she rested her head against his chest. Kaylani watched in quiet awe. "She's choosing again." "Not me," Jalen said gently. "She's choosing freedom." That same day, alarms rippled across the Academy's perimeter. A courier's ship arrived in haste, bearing news from the Outer Rim. 3 colonies had gone silent. In the war chamber, projections flickered to life. Footage, fragmented and eerie, showed glimpses of void fractures opening in space, massive shadow forms slipping through, and the unmistakable shrieks of corrupted guardians on the ground, those whose bonds had been twisted by fear. "We were too slow," Kaylani said bitterly. "Vayer found them first." Jalen's jaw tightened. "He's binding them through pain." "He's not binding," said Arvin grimly. "He's unleashing." New scans showed groups of dark-furred guardians rampaging through settlements, coordinated by a central resonance pulse. Not bonded, but controlled. Artificially synchronized through void implants. "They're calling them hollows," Arvin added. "Bonds without souls." Jalen looked at Salen, then at Saran, who now nestled beside the older guardian. "We can't just hold our ground anymore," he said. "It's time we move." Kaylani nodded. "Then I'll summon the Concordance Riders. All of them. And I'll lead them," Jalen said. Kaylani raised an eyebrow. "You're sure? I didn't come all this way to watch others defend what we've built." Salen let out a low, fierce growl. Saran echoed it, higher pitched, but no less determined. Kaylani smiled faintly. "Then we ride at first light." That night, Jalen stood with Kaylani on the edge of the cliff outside the Academy, watching the stars wheel above them. "We thought this was about proving the bond could survive beyond bloodlines," she murmured. "It still is," Jalen said. "But now we have to prove it can survive war." Kaylani turned to him. "And love?" He stepped closer, brushing her cheek with the back of his hand. "That too." They stood there in silence, the two guardians resting nearby, their breath steady beneath the stars. Tomorrow, they would ride into the unknown. Together. The light of Sarender's twin suns barely crested the horizon when the Concordance riders assembled. Over 500 strong, they filled the sky platforms of the Academy's launch terraces, lined in orderly columns. Each rider stood beside their guardian, no two alike. Some creatures bore sleek bodies built for speed, others lumbering forms with scale-armored hides. Their colors danced under the rising sun, amber, obsidian, sapphire, and emerald, while their bondmates checked gear, weapons, and comms, every pair resonating faintly with energy that sparked between them in threads of gold and blue. Jalen stood at the head of the vanguard, Solon by his side. The Guardian's fully matured form was now a force of nature, nearly 5 meters tall at the shoulder, with a ridge of protective fur running from his crown to his tail. His claws shimmered with resonance. His eyes glowed like twin stars. Kaylani approached from the rear lines, astride her own guardian. A sleek, violet-furred beast named Nithara, bonded to her through ritual years before she ever met Jalen. She wore battle robes woven with reflective filament, her silver hair braided down her back, her staff secured across her back. "Your orders, Commander Thorn?" she asked, her voice carrying clearly. Jalen took a breath and stepped forward, his voice amplified by the crystalline spires of the launch deck. "This is not a campaign for territory," he began. "Not a conquest. This is a reclamation. Vaer has corrupted what was sacred. The Umbrivores are feeding on our divisions." He looked over the rows of guardians and their riders. "We ride not as humans or stellants. Not as nobles or outcasts. We ride as bondmates. And together we will remind the void that it cannot devour what it cannot break." A cheer erupted, not wild, but resolute, as powerful and unified as the resonance that bound every rider to their guardian. The sky boomed with the ignition of gravships overhead. 10 minutes later, the Valkeeper and its accompanying fleet streaked toward the edge of Concordance space. Their target, the colony of Miros Station, last seen transmitting a garbled distress call before all light vanished from the system. Miros floated in shadow. The once vibrant terraformed colony orbited a crimson star now flickering erratically. Great black vines of void energy coiled through the atmosphere, strangling solar arrays and disrupting orbital platforms. The station's planetary shield flickered on and off like a dying heartbeat. Jalen and Kaylani surveyed the system from the command bridge. "Radiation levels are spiking," said Arvin from the tactical console. "But it's not stellar. It's coming from the planet's surface." "Void anchors," Kaylani muttered. "They're trying to root the breach. Turn Miros into a permanent entry point." Jalen's jaw tightened. "We break those anchors, we sever the link. Landing coordinates locked," came the call from the flight crew. Jalen and Kaylani moved without hesitation, leading the first wave of riders down to the surface. Solon and Nithara bounded down from the ramp with fierce grace, guardians of light and shadow in perfect harmony. The moment their paws touched Miros' broken soil, the world screamed. Black structures, half living, half voidstone, rose from the ground, birthing twisted shapes with too many limbs and no eyes. Hollow guardians. Dozens of them. Behind them, silhouetted against a broken sky, stood Vaer. Clad in dark armor etched with corrupted glyphs, his expression was unreadable. "Ah," he said. "The great outsider returns. And the princess who forgot her place. You've stolen guardians," Kaylani snapped. "Perverted the bond. I've freed them," he answered. "From your sanctimonious lies. I offered them purpose. You offered them fear." Vaer extended one hand, and the hollow guardians surged forward. "Defensive formation!" Jalen shouted. The Concordance riders formed up in seconds, guardians roaring as the battlefield lit with streaks of energy and light. Solon charged into the enemy lines, slamming aside corrupted creatures with righteous fury. Kaylani moved like a dancer of death, her staff spinning with precision as Nithara weaved between enemies, casting shields and blasts of sound-based resonance. It was chaos. But within the storm, Jalen and Solon moved as one. Every strike they landed, every movement they made, resonated across the field, lifting the spirits of those around them. The true bond was alive, and it was winning. Suddenly, from behind a ruined tower, a hollow guardian, twice Solon's size, crackling with dark energy, lunged at Saran, who had joined the field under the watch of 3 protective riders. She froze. Too young. Too inexperienced. Jalen saw it happen, and moved. Solon! They reached her in time. Solon intercepted the strike, jaws clamping down on the hollow's throat. Jalen vaulted from his saddle, grabbing Saran and rolling them clear. The battle raged. Guardians clashed. Light flared against shadow. But by dawn, the anchors were shattered. Vaer fled into the void, his armies scattered. Miros was scarred, but not lost. The void had tested the concordance bond. And it had failed. The battle for Miros had shifted the war. News of the concordance riders' victory spread beyond Sarander and Earth, out to the fringe worlds, the neutral systems, and even to the hidden enclaves of surviving Guardian enclaves once thought extinct. Survivors emerged. Old records were unearthed. More Guardians awoke from stasis, drawn by the pulsing resonance of a unified call that could no longer be ignored. And Vaer's retreat, though ominous, marked a turning point. Back aboard the Valkeeper, Jalen stood beside Solon in the ship's arboretum, watching new seedlings bloom in bioluminescent soil, a gift from Miros' grateful survivors. Kaylani approached, her violet robes unfastened at the collar, her stance less formal than usual. The weight she carried for months seemed lighter now, even if only slightly. 2 more colonies want to join the pact, she said softly. And the Synod has formally abolished the old bloodline law. Bonds are now open to all. Jalen let out a quiet breath. It's happening. She nodded. You made it happen. No, he said, turning to her. We did. Solon let out a pleased grumble, and nuzzled against both of them. Nearby, Saran played in the sunbeams, still guarded, still healing, but no longer afraid. A young candidate, a hybrid girl with streaked hair and steady hands, had begun training with her. Jalen had seen it, the first spark of resonance forming. She's going to choose soon, Kaylani said. She already has, Jalen replied. They just haven't said it yet. They walked slowly together through the garden, their hands brushing, then joining. What comes next? Kaylani asked. Peace if we're lucky, Jalen replied. War if we're ready. And us? Jalen looked at her. We build. They stopped at the heart of the garden. Around them, the carved walls flickered with projected scenes. Riders training, guardians bonding, fleets patrolling the edge of known space. Hope, once fragile, now embedded in the very core of civilization. You know, Kaylani said, leaning in. When I first saw you, I thought you were reckless. Disruptive. Dangerous. And now? I still think that, she whispered with a smirk. But now I see why that matters. They kissed, soft, sure, with the strength of 2 people who had faced the end of all things and chosen love anyway. Above them, the stars turned. And somewhere in the void, the umbrivores stirred again, but now, for the first time in eons, the light was ready.